Okay, guys, my name is Tommy and I am an addict. And thank you for coming to the Inner Fix. And this is actually our second episode. As always, I like to start off with a moment of silence followed by the serenity prayer. So if we could just bow our heads just for 1 second. God, grant me the serenity
Ready
to accept the
to
things
accept
I
the things
cannot
I cannot
change,
change,
to change the
Courage to
courage
change the
to
things
change
I
the things
can,
I
that I
can,
can, and the
and the
wisdom to know
wisdom
the
to know
difference.
the
to know
You
the
difference.
see,
difference.
I almost messed that up, and so I know it by heart. And let me tell you something. And for the viewers who are looking, we were just having the discussion about the Serenity Prayer, and a lot of people think that because we mentioned the word God, that this is a religious platform, and it's not. I am not religious at all. I'm spiritual. Since I've came back into the rooms, I've connected with my higher power, which I call God now, but in the very beginning, I didn't want to hear that word God at all. To me, I felt like God had let me down you know, through all my trials and tribulations. I tried to get myself together. I was a good husband, good, father, good provider, and yet and still I ended up in divorce. And I was going to church, and the church wasn't doing good things. So I was like, I didn't want to hear anything about God. But one of the things I did use, and Johnny and Kim, I guess you guys can chime in too. And these are our team. There's Kim M and there's Johnny F. We are the Interfix. One of the things I used was good orderly direction, a group of drug addicts, because you know what? It was a higher power. It was something greater than myself that could help me get my act together. Because, again, I was suffering from 3D. And if you don't know what 3D is, it's, well, for me, it was despair, desperation, and depression. I had it all when I was coming into the rooms. And then not being spiritually connected either. I mean, I was really broken. And because I used good orderly direction and a group of drug addicts to help me, I'm able to get the years clean that I have now. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I also had the issue with God when I was 18, and I was first sent to AA by my dad after a rough experience over spring break my senior year of high school. I remember hearing the word God a lot in the meeting, and I was like, this is not for me. I don't need this. I'm too cool for this. I don't want to deal, it's like a religious program and I don't need that. So it took me 23 years to come back to, to actually go to rehab and JRC, and then actually go to meetings and find out that it wasn't a religious program, and that God is just their term for a higher power. And like you said, Tommy, it could be good orderly direction, gift of desperation. That's what I had. I was super desperate when I got here. And that gift of desperation is what brought me back. So yeah, definitely not religious, but spiritual for sure.
What about you,
Yeah,
Johnny?
I mean, like Tommy and Kim. My experience with God started younger. I mean, baptized, made my communion, made my confirmation. My dad was, when he was a kid, he went to Catholic school. He was an altar boy. I was an altar boy. Very involved in church. And then, I had an experience during church one day where my dad was just fed up with stuff and he walked out and he kind of walked away from the church. And that gave me my first experience with like, wow, really, this whole God thing. And then, my father, who was a phenomenal man, suffered for years with cancer. And, everything he did in his life, he did for my mom, my sister and I, and countless, countless kids that didn't have opportunities that others had to play sports and to be involved in the community. And, after watching him suffer with cancer for like 14 years and then die at 54 years old, that's when I was really like you, Tommy, like there's this guy, there's God, and, and I watched all these good people dying young. And I was just like, nah, there's something, I got turned off from God completely.
Right.
And I didn't want to hear. And even when I was younger, and my first couple times in rehab, I was like, I don't want to hear all this God stuff, and I don't pray, and I don't, all the steps to me all mentioned God in them, and I felt like, oh well, if I don't believe in God, I end up getting sober if all these people use God to get sober. But yeah, at JRC, the Serenity Prayer, and a lot of the things that we learned about higher power, and that it just has to be something greater than yourself that you believe in. It doesn't have to necessarily be God. And we did an assignment where we put the Serenity Prayer into our own words, and it still had the same exact meaning, and it worked the same way, but you didn't have to put God in there. And them little acronyms: good orderly direction, group of drunks, group of drug addicts. The one that Kim used, I really like, the gift of desperation. Sometimes the way our brains work, the way my brain worked was I would obsess over that. Oh God, it's a God program, so I'm not going to get it. Instead of just understanding there's more than one way and I have to use what works for me. And as long as I'm getting that message and that recovery, whatever acronym I use or the spirituality part of it, today I identify I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I have a power greater than myself that I believe in, and there's a certain way I live my life, and that
Agreed.
works for me. So
Right. Yeah. So for the listeners who are chiming in, I want you to know that this is not a religious platform. You'll never hear us talking about things in the Bible. That's just not what we do here. But it's having that connection with something that's greater than us that will, restore us to sanity. As they say. Just a quick disclaimer. Just want to let you know, the Inner Fix. We are. We're a platform that talks about mental health, recovery, and addiction. Our message is hope. Our promise is freedom, that any addict can stop using, lose the desire to lose, and live a life better than what they were doing in active addiction. And with that being said, I wanted to talk about something that is very, very important, guys, and that's the first step. I think one of the reasons why I had a problem with getting clean and why I relapsed so many times is because I couldn't adhere to the first step. I didn't want to think I was an addict. I didn't really understand that I had a problem until I realized I had a problem. You know, and knowing what the first step in the beginning was, I don't know, somewhat unheard of for me because, I was 20 something years old and they were saying, to admit that I was a drug addict. And I was saying to myself, well, wait a minute, hold on. I grew up in addiction. Everybody around me got high. My mom got high. My dad got high. My brothers got high. My sibling, my family, everyone, my friends. So how am I a drug addict? I don't stand in front of the liquor store. I'm not stooped over on heroin and nodding or something like that. Only thing I do is smoke weed, sniff a little whatever, or take a pill here and there. And I didn't find myself at that time out of control. I thought I had it, pretty much together until I realized, again, that maybe I was missing days at work. Maybe I did a little bit too much, or I was spending a little bit too much money. But to me, that wasn't an addict. That was just me having a good time enjoying my life. So when I first went into treatment for the first 28 days and I came out, I was like, okay, fine. I just need to clean up a little bit. I need to slow it down, not go so aggressively with the drugs and so forth. But, and 30 days later, I was back out using again. And I was perfectly okay with it too. And because again, I was young. I couldn't fathom the idea of never ever having a drink, smoking, or anything for the rest of my life at 20 something years old in my early 20s. I mean, come on, there were birthday parties. I used to work for an office. There were office parties. There were barbecues. Are you telling me I can't have a drink at 22, 23 years old? That seemed absurd to me. And that's why it was so easy for me just to go back out and just do the same thing over and over and over again. And I got to be honest with you, my life wasn't totally, totally bad. I don't think I had reached a rock bottom to the point where I felt like, there was that gift of desperation. I didn't think my life was that insane. I thought I was, functioning pretty well. It's just that I like to smoke weed. I like to drink. like to sniff a little bit. I like to do, party. And I thought that was common, until, you know, uh, almost 10 years later. And then I realized that, wait a minute, hold on, I'm failing. I can't keep a job. I can't keep an apartment. My relationships are horrible. a lot of crying, a lot of, you know, gift of desperation. Yeah, I was desperate. I didn't have too much depression then, but I realized, also too that I just could not hold a job steadily. And my boss was like, "Listen, either you get some help or you're canned." And I used to work for a law firm at the time, and I didn't want to lose my job because it was a decent job, and I was responsible for half the rent. I was living with this young lady and so forth, and I realized that my responsibility lied with me keeping that job. So I went back into rehab, and I remember thinking it was going to be another 28 days, but I was so far gone I didn't realize that in the TC, it was the therapeutic community. They said,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Tommy, you're not going to be here for 28 days. You're going to be here for 6 months." And I looked at the lady like, 6 months? Are you fucking crazy? That's like a jail sentence. I'm not, what? 6 months? But I started realizing, hey, look, if I can do 6 months clean, I could probably do the rest of my life clean. And my life was fucking crazy at that time anyway. So I gave it a shot. That 6 months turned into almost 11 months. But I graduated the program. I tried to take everything in. And what's so crazy, I came out and life changed for me greatly. I stopped using, and there are rewards when it comes down to staying clean. Keep in mind, I didn't have a recovery. I wasn't going to meetings. I didn't do none of the 9 suggestions. I was just clean. Then I got into the church, and I started, using the church to keep me clean. And that helped greatly. I was able to establish a business. I got married. I had a house built. I mean, things came in really, really good. I wrote my first book. I mean, things really, really looked good. But because I didn't have a recovery, when the divorce started happening, and when the church wasn't doing what the church was supposed to be doing, I didn't have a leg to stand on. And I went back out for another 14 years, and because again, drugs and alcohol, I mean, I was in so much pain. Drugs and alcohol is our number one pain reliever. And that was the way I went. That's how I coped. That's how I managed. That's how I numbed everything that was going on in my life. And it wasn't until I came back into NJRC that I realized that I have a problem, and it was that first step. I had to admit that I have a freaking problem. And once I was ready to surrender, because that's what the first step is saying. You had to, you know, uh, we realized that we were powerless over our addiction, and that our lives had become unmanageable. And that's exactly where I was. My life had become totally unmanageable. Now I had money. I was killing myself because now I have the money to drown my sorrows. You know what I mean? And it was that admittance, it was that surrender that made me realize that I need to shut the fuck up and listen to these people. You know what I mean? Because I can't sit up and do it by myself. I tried to do it by myself. Bro, I was living in a mansion, right? And I used to be in this mansion, this big old, home, and I would stay in one room because I didn't want to do anything else but get high. I wouldn't go into my own business. And I used to think that my employees, didn't know, but I'd just be so fucked up. I called the office and I'd be laughing and giggling and all that stuff. And I'm like, they know. But that's how my life was. And at the time, when I first got into Boca, I was broken down. I mean, I was stripped of everything. And, it was that surrender that said, you know what? I am tired of being sick and tired, and I need to do something with my life. I was 50 something years old, bro. And I was like, I can't live my life like this. Something has to give. I need change. And once I made that admittance that I had a problem, that I was an addict, that's when everything started changing. And when I share in a room, I tell people straight up, my name is Tommy. I'm an addict. I'm an addict today. I was an addict last week. I was an addict 50 years ago, and I'll be an addict for the rest of my life because that's the truth, and I'm okay with it now. I just don't have to pick up and use, and it's a great thing that I was able to establish that. And for all the viewers who are chiming in onto the inner fix, once you make that decision to admit that you have a problem, that's when the healing can begin. Johnny, Kim, what do you guys, I mean, how does the first step affect you in your recovery?
Kim, you want to go?
Sure. I'm an addict. My problem is Kim. Yeah, for the first step, I knew back when I was like 16 that I was an addict after I started taking pills and I was withdrawing from them. That's when I knew that, I was powerless over my addiction. The second half of the first step, though, the unmanageability, that my life was unmanageable, I didn't think so. I thought I was okay because I managed to keep a job for, the 21 years now. And I had my apartment, I had a car, I still had custody of my son, and I was getting by. But then once I went to rehab and I had a counselor explain to me, that my life was unmanageable. Like, think of all the things that I was doing that I wouldn't have done if I was sober. And those are ways that my life was unmanageable. I thought that nobody knew that I was high all the time when I was at work. Even though I was nodding out at my desk, there was no way that they didn't know. But I was convinced at the time because addicts always believe that we're hiding it well and that nobody knew. And I showed up late to work several times, like really late, like 4 times in 2 weeks. And my boss called me out on it, and I blamed the other people in my office. I said that they were being mean. I mean, that was true, that I wasn't getting along with them. And I said that they were stressing me out and I couldn't sleep at night. So I was falling back to sleep in the morning. And that's why I was so late to work. And I was also making my son late for school on those days because I was the one who got him up in the morning and I drove him to school. So it was affecting his life too. And finally, realizing that my life was unmanageable because of those reasons, because of many more things that driving while I was high, that's not a manageable life. I could have killed someone else or myself or my son. That was all unmanageability. And being able to surrender finally, I became so desperate. I spent, like Tommy said, just crying. I spent so many days in my bathroom. I spent most of my time in my bathroom. That's where I used. And I would stay in there. I would also go in there when I was crying because I didn't want my son to see me, because I figured it would upset him if he saw me crying. And I didn't want to do that. So I spent literally like 90% of my time in my bathroom, getting high and crying because this was my life and not understanding how I got here. So they say the first step is the only one you have to get 100% right. And the rest of the steps, it's progress, not perfection. I totally agree with that. Once I finally surrendered, it's so freeing when you can finally admit, that you don't have control over the addiction, over your life. And now that I'm not, I used to spend so much time just focusing, like, how am I going to get more drugs? When, do I have enough to get through the next day? Do I, constantly, like, do I have enough? Hiding some stuff somewhere so that I would have it for later. Do I have finding ways to make money? Like, I would do Instacart. I was a driver for Instacart. I would go shopping for people. And as soon as I got the money, I would spend it. And I liked it because they paid you like within 2 hours of the shopping thing. So I would immediately get the money and then go right to my dealer and spend it. I learned the hard way that because Instacart doesn't take taxes out, they do tax you. So when tax time came, I owed them a lot of like $7,000 or something like crazy like that. And I had nothing to show for it. It all went right to drugs. And, my life was definitely unmanageable. And now that now I feel like I have all this free time that I'm not focusing on, you know, that one thing, that was all I could think about was, when am I going to get more drugs? How am I going to get more drugs? I need to get high now. I need to get high again. Like, it was just so, so unmanageable. And I see that now. And I'm just grateful for this program. I'm grateful for, just for this topic. Thank you for bringing it up. And I'll let Johnny share now.
Well, before Johnny shares, I just want to say isn't it crazy how, because you were saying, I was saying I was in a room and you said you were in a bathroom. We
Yeah.
put ourselves like into our own little prison.
Right. Isolating ourselves.
We isolate ourselves from the world as if, there is a camera hidden outside where people are actually watching us, and nobody's watching. We're just doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
And we would prefer to be hidden into. Now here it is. Like I said, I lived in a mansion, and I have a nice home, and it's like I'd rather stay in this one little area because exploring the rest of the house meant that I had to come outside of myself. And that meant that I had to do something different. And I was so comfortable being, trapped up into my addiction that staying in that one room was okay for me. Staying inside the bathroom was okay for you, Ken. You know what I mean?
Right.
And yes, you didn't want your son to see you crying. You didn't want to see your son using, but the insanity is that we locked ourselves up in our own little prison.
Right.
That's crazy, Johnny.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. Thanks, Tommy. Step one. Oof. I think, like Kim and Tommy, I could always admit that I might have had an issue with drugs, but the fact that I was powerless or that my life was unmanageable, I guess I would say the words, because then, I got credit for the group and all the rehabs I was in, you know, and I was a master manipulator and a chameleon, so I could say whatever you needed me to say and sound really good saying it, but I never really was believing it. Because again, when I was young, where I grew up and stuff, there was a lot of homeless, a lot of poverty, a lot of addiction and alcoholism. Addiction runs rampant in my family on my mom's side. All of her brothers and sisters, all of their children, all my cousins, I have family members that have died from it. That's what they did. Like that's basically how they got through life. I mean, my grandmother, my mom, my aunt, they would take pills around the clock all day long to get through life. And their answer, well, they always had a prescription. So that's how my real addiction started. I experimented in my early teens, but late teens, I hurt my back and I got a prescription. So now a doctor was giving it to me. So, I couldn't be a drug addict if a doctor's prescribing me to take this medicine to make me better.
Mhm.
But of course, it also says on the bottle, take one every 4 to 6 hours or as needed. That guy didn't know what he's talking about. I have a higher tolerance than that. That doctor's silly. Take 3 every 2 hours. It's safe.
Boom.
Yeah. So, and in hindsight, I look back and then I'm like, that should have been a red flag. Like, not even listen to the doctor now. Like, you're running your own program. But, I had to learn the hard way. And, you know, even the earlier days when I went to rehab, because I got some legal issues when I was younger, I was always forced in. Court ordered, mom ordered, and then, in the beginning of my relationship with my wife, girlfriend ordered. And I was there for 28 days to satisfy whatever and sound good. And I still didn't believe I was an addict because, I had a roof over my head. I had a job. I had decent clothes. I wasn't living on the street. So I can't be that. And I was taking pills from a doctor. I wasn't out ripping and running and, shooting heroin or smoking crack or anything like that until I was, because, I never got the message. For me, admitting I was powerless was tough because, growing up, that wasn't a thing in my house. We didn't admit that I didn't have power over something. It was a lot of mindset stuff. A lot of the people I grew up with, it's mind over matter. You just got to have the will and the fortitude to just get through something. So to admit I was powerless I wasn't raised that way. And then the unmanageability thing, I thought I was managing my life, looking back, I couldn't even manage my own addiction. I'm going to buy all this stuff and I'm going to ration it and then it would all be gone in a couple hours. So I wasn't even managing my own addiction. That's how unmanageable my life was. And I talk to people today, My sister went through it, and she was never in trouble. She had a beautiful home, a beautiful job, but and even for me, I don't identify as a drug addict because was my thing. But by no means, if I put alcohol in my body, my life becomes completely unmanageable. If I drink once a year, I'm going to end up in a hospital because I got beat up because I ran my mouth, in a jail cell because I broke the law. I mean, so that to me, that's right there. That's that flag of unmanageability, man. If I drink once a year and I end up in jail or in a hospital, that's kind of unmanageability at its finest right there. So it doesn't matter what substance I put in my body. If I'm not, my life becomes completely unmanageable. And the thing with moving forward and getting recovery and starting to understand it, towards the end of my last run before I went to NJRC, I became all those things that I saw growing up. I just happened to be, I was that homeless guy that lived in a decent house. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have raggedy clothes and I slept but I went home every night. So that's the only difference between me and the guy in the street at the end. The only difference, because my behaviors were identical to his or hers. Hygiene took a back seat, food took a back seat, basic daily responsibilities took a back seat. I even had an old boss who I ended up talking to, and he's like, I knew something was up. When you would call every couple months because your grandmother died, so you couldn't come in. He's like, I didn't know how many grandmothers you had, so I didn't want to be insensitive. But I had like 5 grandmas. I only had 2, but I used that excuse so many times because my life was so unmanageable. I didn't even realize what the hell I was saying. But I was just existing. You talk about that prison we put ourselves in. I have a beautiful wife who supported me through everything. I have a beautiful home, and I would sleep on a couch in the living room every day, every night. That's where I existed, to the point where when I got home from prison, well, actually before I even went to prison, when I came home from NJRC on one of my weekend visits, we had to throw the couch out and buy a new couch because there were so many baggies in the couch, and that's because that's where I existed. I was guy on the couch. You could see I'm not even a big guy, but you could see like the indent of where I sat and laid. And the bathroom, it was the couch and the bathroom. And that's essentially where I existed. I didn't go and see people because I either wasn't allowed to or wasn't invited, or I'd rather stay home and do my drugs. Things that my wife would go do. That was like, yes, I can't wait till she leaves because now I can do all this stuff. I had mirrors set up in my house and randomly in my living room so they could see like the hallway. So I could see if she was coming out the door so I could smoke crack in my living room. Like the mirror there was no functionality for the mirror to be in the living room. But that's where my brain was. That's how unmanageable my thinking was. That's how crazy everything was. And it wasn't until I got to NJRC and doing groups and actually talking about stuff like that, my counselor would be like, you don't think that's the definition of unmanageability? I started, when I got clearer mind and different perspective, the amount of power I have over my life now and the amount of manageability I have is incredible. I'm not powerless today. If I put a drink or a drug in my body, I become powerless over that because of my addiction. But I took all my power back, and like Kim said something that gave me goosebumps. The amount of time that I have today. I used to think all the time, I got no time for that. But that's because 23 and a half hours out of the day, I was doing drugs. So yeah, I didn't have any time for anything else. I didn't even have time for bathing. Like I'll keep it real. I didn't bathe daily because I couldn't. That was not an important part of my life at all, which is crazy. But the amount of time I have, I do more in one day today sober than I did in weeks using when I was in active addiction. I accomplished more in one day sober than I did in weeks or months when I was using drugs because I'm able to manage my life. I'm able to think clear-minded. Yeah, sure. Do I still make I don't want to say irrational. Do I still make bad decisions, or I still have anger? I still have emotions. I still make mistakes. Of course, I'm a human being. But today, I can understand, you know what? I was wrong. I have a little humility. You know, I won't let it happen again. Let's fix this. And I'm able to talk about it and be honest and open about it. You know, when I was using, I was not having that conversation. Unless you were talking to me about, you know, how much I could get for 50, or if you were my dealer, I wasn't having no conversations with you. You know, it just wasn't happening. So, you know, but I think the key to step one, and the key to, like Kim said too, the key to my sobriety is step one. You know, throughout the course of my day or the year or the month or whatever it may be, I will do things differently or change things. Like I'll read the steps, or I'll like, you know what? That means a little something different to me now. So, you know, I'll implement it that way in my life. Step one is always even keel. It's always, I am powerless over my addiction, and if I use, my life becomes unmanageable. There is no, that's just it for me. It's in black and white, as they would say. So I start my day with that. I know that if I put something in my body, all bets are off. And it might not happen that first day, but that is the insidiousness of the addiction, because I get away with it the first day, and the second day, I got it, and I'm going to do things differently now. And then I end up back in prison and rehab and divorced and all that other shit. So, you know, step one for me is paramount in my recovery. I make sure I'm aware of it every day. Any situation I go into, you know, if I have family or friends that are having a party and they're drinking, yeah, I'm not going to lie, that cold beer on a hot summer day after mowing the lawn, that would be amazing. But today I'm able to stop and say, you crazy, bro? Everything you've gained in the last 2 years because you've been sober, and you're going to risk that over a cold beer? Just drink a cold glass of seltzer water. It's going to give you the same thing. One beer is not going to get me drunk and get that buzz anyway. It's going to lead me to do a lot of other crazy shit in the long run. So, you know, I'm able to weigh it today because I understand that once I put something in my system, I'm powerless over it, and my life will become unmanageable. And I'm just not willing to risk everything that I've built back up in the last couple of years over something so irrelevant as drugs or alcohol. You know, I just don't need it in my life. I found other ways to have fun and to laugh and to become a better man and a better husband. So that's what step one means to me. Thanks for letting me share. You guys got anything else?
Thanks. Yeah, no, Johnny, I thought, you know, what you were saying, both you and Kim, man, you guys touched on some really important messages, you know, the insanity, the insanity of it all. You know, currently on the Interfix, we're doing this on YouTube and on TikTok. We're doing a segment where we have these episodes called When Addiction Speaks. And it's so funny how when we're in the grips of addiction and when we're trying to recover, addiction speaks to us in our own voice, and it tells us the most craziest things. And even in recovery, that's when it really, really, really seeps into our lives, because it wants to deceive us and let us know that, you know, we're okay now. You know, you got 6 months clean. You know, oh, you're doing all right. You could have one drink. Or, you know what, you had a bad day today. You know what, come on, have a drink, you know, or, you know, have a smoke. It's only one blunt. You know what I'm saying? And, or have, you know, one sniff. It's only one, man. It's not like it's going to kill you. And that's the craziness about, you know, this addiction. And that's why I find it so important to keep the first step, like you said, Johnny, in front of us, because if once you lose that and you stop focusing on your recovery, once you stop thinking or admitting that you're an addict, that you cannot take for, you know, a drink on that summer day when it's hot outside and you just finished doing the lawn, when you can't do those things, then you know that, okay, fine, I know exactly where this is going to lead. You know, and that's what addiction does. It talks to us in our voice, in our own voice, saying that it's okay. You know what I mean? Or will allow us to forget about, you know, what we went through prior to getting clean. And that's something we have to always keep, you know, in front of us. You know, here it is. I got, you know, a few years clean now, and let me tell you, man, periodically I still have a drug dream. I mean, they are so apparent and so vivid. I wake up thinking that, did I just relapse?
Mhm.
Yep. I've had
You know what
those
I
too.
mean? Yeah, it's crazy. And the thing is, I'm going to say this to all our viewers: who if you're struggling and you're just coming into recovery, it's not going to be easy. I mean, putting the drugs down or stop drinking, that's almost like the easy part. But as Kim had said and as Johnny pointed out, there's that void now. Now I got all the time in the world. What am I going to do with this time? And for me, it's all about recovery. I chase my recovery like I chase my drugs. I keep this thing in front of me at all times because I know once I lose sight of my addiction and where it took me to, and realize that I can't even have that one drink on a summer day. Not even one. I can't even fathom the idea of having it because I know that, like you said, Johnny, if I have that one drink, it's not going to get me buzzed. Or it might give me a little buzz, but I'm going to crave more.
Mm.
There's no way I'm going to be able to sit and just say, damn, I
And
wouldn't
then it
mind having
lowers your
another.
inhibition. Sorry. And then it lowers
Oh
your
my,
inhibitions and you
you're
need
so
to
right.
the drugs.
Yep.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, this is a
exactly.
good idea. I can have this.
Exactly. And that's when the brain change. And now you say, oh, come on, just one more is not going to help. You just had one. And the next you that one comes to two, then the two becomes a six pack.
And
I mean, I was
the most insidious part about that is I always get away with it in the beginning until
exactly,
now I'm dependent on it again. That's that
exactly,
crazy insidiousness of addiction. It lets you get away with
exactly.
it and get away with it. And then before you know it, you're like, fuck, I'm addicted to heroin again. Like I'm dependent on, and now I'm in that cycle and I'm trapped because I don't want to tell everybody I'm using again. And I don't want to lose everything. So,
Right.
well, I don't want to deal with all these thoughts. So fuck it. I'll just keep using it and I'll taper myself down. Dude, that was my story for years.
Oh my
Years.
God.
And my
Same
relapse
here, bro.
my relapses never started with the drug that I craved. They always started with either shitty thinking, putting myself in bad situations, thinking I can drink or smoke or do something else because I can manage that. And then, like Kim just said, my inhibition goes down, and then I go and get the drug I really want, and then it's all over.
Or, just irrational emotions, just things. Because we as addicts, man, we will find almost any reason to use.
Absolutely.
It could be anger, it could be frustration. Here comes the girlfriend, the wife, the husband that's getting on my goddamn nerves. The kids are getting on my damn nerves. My boss is being a fucking asshole. We'll find any excuse to say, what, fuck it.
It happened to me just the other day, honestly. My ex-husband pissed me off because he promised to see my son, and my son was excited for once, and then he didn't show up. And, I felt it broke my son's heart, and I knew it, and that breaks my heart. So I was like, oh man, I wish I could get high right now.
Escape.
And then I played the tape forward. Like if I did that right now, even if I didn't get caught, I would continue to do it because I knew I didn't get caught, so I could keep doing it. And that's what my addiction would tell me, and I would keep going. But then I remembered that there's nothing that is so bad that a drink or a drug will not make worse.
Ooh.
Exactly.
And that's
Exactly.
the craziness. I think Kim, so glad you just said that. It gives me the chills. So many times. I mean, like you said, Tommy, I could have been the type of person that I didn't get the raise and the promotion I deserve, so fuck it, let me drink. Or, I got a raise and the promotion I deserve, so let me celebrate.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It didn't
Yeah.
it didn't matter. It didn't matter. And the
Wait,
problem with that
wait.
is,
It's my
yeah,
birthday. I
yeah.
gotta sit up and get it. I gotta get it in.
Yeah, it didn't matter. Addiction spoke to me either way. And like
Right.
Kim was just saying, it's that whole this is happening to me, this is bullshit, or something as simple as as an addict, I love instant gratification. That's what I craved. And I knew drugs would always give that to me. And I'm saying this because I want everybody to understand I got 4.5 years sober and I still have days where, you know, my patience is tested or whatever, or I'm watching a certain
Mhm.
movie and I get that thought. That is not abnormal. And for me, in the beginning, all the other times I didn't get sobriety is because, I had this perception that once I put the drugs down, everything was going to be, that aha, and I was cured and everything was going to be great. And then when it wasn't, I didn't get that instant gratification from sobriety. So I would go use because I craved that I need
Right,
it
right.
right now. I want it, and I want it now. That king baby, that
Right.
instant gratification. So
Mm.
you got to be patient. Early recovery is tough
Ugh,
because you're learning how to live again. You're dealing with emotions. You're trying to repair all the relationships you broke, and there's a lot of shit going on. You might have legal issues. You know, I went to prison after 6 months of rehab. But I was able to reflect and take time once I got clarity to understand that, you know what? Like Kim just said, yeah, there's some shitty shit. There's some shitty stuff that happened to me today. As you say,
right.
Tommy, life gets lifey.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, a drink or a drug is, if I have 10 issues or 10 problems, a drink or a drug just gives me an 11th and a 12th problem.
Right.
There's no solution there for me. There is no solution in a drink or a drug. And I just have to be patient and keep course. And good things do come from it. You know, a lot of times people, they get turned off because they got a few months sober and they're still having these fucked up thoughts. So it's like, what's the point? I'm not doing
Right.
drugs and I'm still miserable. So why not do drugs? At
Exactly.
least I'll numb it. At least
Yeah.
I won't feel the misery. You know, you got to just give it time, man. You have to, you have to work at it. You have to work
You're
at it,
so
and
right.
good things will come. And the biggest thing, I think, the thing that I'm most grateful for is the peace of mind I have today and the clarity that I have to understand that this too shall pass. I'm having a shitty thought right now. I had a drug dream last night. I thought I relapsed in. You know, the people at work are driving me crazy. It's been a long summer, but I'm sober. It's a way of life for me. It's not just a word. I don't just throw that word out there to say, oh, I'm sober today. I live
Right.
a sober life. I try to better myself every day. I try to make good connections. I try to do service. In every aspect of my life, I'm trying to become a better person, not 6 years from now, or, just a little bit better tomorrow than I was today. And, the reward is things start to show up. I start to show up for people and people start to show up for me and my life becomes better astronomically, but it takes time.
Right.
Don't leave before the
Y-
miracle happens.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what's so crazy is that, and I laugh about this because I said my addiction is so mean, right?
Yeah.
You watch the baseball game or basketball game, and then here comes this commercial with, the Budweiser, and they're pouring it into a glass. It looks so good. They seem the little the condensation drip off the
Yeah.
glass, and you're like, oh my
And they
gosh.
zoom
Or
in on it.
yeah, exactly. And wait, hold on. Then you watch a music video with some rappers or something. They smoke, and you're like, okay, I see what you're. And then, of course, I live in New Jersey, right? So they made they made weed legal here. So it's like everywhere you go, you smell it, and you're like,
Oh, yeah.
really, dude? Really? Are you serious? But it's really having being able to play the tape, as Kim had said. Play the tape all the way through.
Mhm.
Because yeah, I can start with the one, and and the thing is, I might not even get caught. You know what I mean? Because that's what addiction does. It will make sure that you don't get caught. It will
Mhm.
make sure that hey, no one's gonna know, and you're like, okay, nobody's gonna know, but you know what? You know, and
Right.
that's the realization of recovery. To know that you as an addict have a problem that you have to always address 24/7 for the rest of your life. There's never a time off. There's never a graduation. There's never, I've completed the program. I've got 5 years clean. I've got 10. No, for the
Right.
rest of our lives.
We're not
Yeah,
graduate students, we're gradual students.
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah, it'll never end once we, again, like I said, lose sight of our recovery. Even if we don't pick up, we're on that first day of relapse. You know what I mean?
And
Guys,
I think
listen, it is. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just say one thing. I think the biggest thing for me is, it took time, right? I said I 6 months in rehab, almost 3 years in prison, 2.5 years in prison, and that sounds like to some people, man, you had to do all that just to get sober and stay sober. That's crazy, dude. I would no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to deal with all that. But I can promise you that what I have today in 2 short years of being out 2.5 years of being out of prison and being sober is I can't put a price on it, man. The family that I have, the love that I have, the respect that I gained back, the promotions I've gotten at work, the money I have in my bank account. My wife and I just booked a vacation to go to St. Martin in October. It wasn't like, am I going to be able to go for a certain amount of days without being in
Right.
withdrawal? Am I going to have enough money? Am I going to be able to contribute? No, I'm paying my own way for the first time
Exactly.
in years. I'm able to contribute to this vacation. It used to be just Johnny on the coattails of Kristen going away because Kristen could afford it. I was just that's that second wheel.
Tag along.
Yeah, I was just there because she was able to pay for me.
And then you're always thinking too, how am I going to get drugs there?
Right,
How am I going to
right.
sneak
I
something
would,
through?
I
How
would
And do
many
not
you
days
go
am I
on.
actually
going for? I need enough
Right.
to get through it.
and do
I would
you
not
actually
go on
enjoy
two
yourself?
vacations because of that. Yeah, yeah. And I'm so excited, man. We booked this beautiful place, and those are just some of the rewards that you get, that I've
Right.
gotten on a daily basis. I love my life today. I very rarely have a boring moment. I laugh all the time. And the difference is I'm really laughing. I'm not laughing because I'm stoned. I'm
Right.
laughing because something is truly funny. Something truly moved me emotionally.
And you're happy.
I cried today. If it comes, watching a movie or something bad, I can deal with the emotion. I let that emotion happen because I'm actually experiencing that emotion. I'm not numb or
I'm
in
telling your
regret
boys.
or despair.
I'm telling your boys that you cry at movies now. So I'm just
No,
letting you
no, I
know.
haven't. I haven't gotten that far, Tommy.
Yeah, but it allows us to get in touch with our emotions now. Being clean and sober, we're able to actually feel now. I think you had said it earlier. We're no longer just existing; we're living,
Absolutely.
and that's the main thing about being in recovery and loving. Being in recovery, because now we're given perspective now. When we're having a bad day, when things are going good, or when things are going horrible, we're able to take a step back and say, "Wait, hold on. How am I going to look at this? How do I acknowledge this situation? Do I just go with my first emotion and just take off? Or do I take a step back and say, wait a minute, this is my addiction talking. This is my addiction trying to tell me something, or my recovery trying to tell me something."
Mhm.
Right, we're able to pause today and
Yes.
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
react, but respond.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you got to understand. It's just a feeling. It's just a
Exactly.
feeling. How am I going to process this feeling?
Yeah,
And
happy,
like I said,
sad, whatever. This too shall pass.
absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely. And there's that disconnect. You talk about the cognitive behavioral thinking. It's you're always. I've had people ask me, "How do you stop the thought?" I don't.
You
I
don't?
don't.
You can't.
4.5 years sober. I could randomly be doing something that triggers a thought. The difference say is I after that thought, like Kim said, I can pause and understand it's just a thought. I don't have to let it turn
Right.
into an obsession and then make a bad decision based on that thought. I can change that thought. I've told the story before where I've mowed my lawn twice in one day. Why? Because that seemed like a better idea than going to get drugs. You know what I mean?
Hey,
Move
hey,
a muscle, change
whatever,
the thought.
Whatever works, right?
whatever works, whatever it takes, right? Hey, listen, guys. We're coming to the end of our episode here. One of the things I wanted to say to the viewers is that if you're out there struggling right now, that's okay. The main thing is to tune in, to get a program, to understand that you don't have to do it alone. Either you can come here to the Interfix, you can go to AA, you can go to NA, but stay connected to something. It's all about that first step. Make the first step first. Admit that you have a problem and then do something about the problem. I always say that your story is not, over yet. You have the pen to rewrite that story. And today, that's what we're all doing here, where we're rewriting our stories. No matter what happened to us in the past is in the past. It'll stay in the past. We can't do nothing about the past, but what we can do today is today, and that's what it's all about. So thanks for joining the Interfix. I'm gonna let Johnny and Kim you know both have their ending messages, and I just want to say I love you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, but thank you, Tommy. And I just want to say, yeah, please reach out for help. As long as you're looking down at the grass and not up at it, there's time to get help.
Yeah.
And everyone wants the best for you, your loved ones especially. So please just reach out for help, and the hand will always be there for you. Thank you.
Never alone. Johnny?
Yeah. To echo what Kim said, if you're alive, you still got a chance. And I say it all the time, alone we suffer, together we recover. This is a program that saved my life, and I am grateful for it because I know I tried it on my own for many, 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 many years. And it wasn't until I got people, like-minded people in my corner and actually started to ask for help that I got what I have today. So if you're out there, if you're struggling, like Tommy said, reach out to someone, tell on yourself, wrap yourself out. It literally made me the difference between life and death, and there's so much life to live. It's a beautiful thing. So please reach out. You know, it could be something so small or something so big. Either one, reach out. If you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence, why not give it a shot? Why not try getting sober?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, thank you, Tommy, as always. Much appreciated. Love you, brother. Thank you, Kim. Love you. You guys are
All right. Thank you,
huge in
guys.
my
Love you
recovery.
too. Listen, guys. Okay, as we say goodbye, I just want to one closing thing. I just want to say, to those who are out there struggling, you're not broken. You can be fixed. Your story's not over, and the world is so much better with you in it. With that, God bless. Take care,
God bless.
guys.
Take care.
God bless.